Oh, self-sabotage. We all do it, but are we aware of it is the question. Why do we do it? Ooh, another question. We are going to answer those today. We're going to talk today about the 10 not so sneaky ways that we tend to self-sabotage, in particular in the launch situation. What tends to happen when we are putting yourself out there, when you're doing something vulnerable, like sharing your offer, your program, you're making an invitation, it can be really stressful. And when we are under stress, we are far more likely to self sabotage because they are protective mechanisms that we were taught as children that began to get hardwired into your subconscious mind that we default to because they are just kind of the original operating system that we were given as children. And so we'll talk more about that. But we're going to talk about how these techniques and these patterns of self sabotage tend to show up in the launch environment. Because as you heard in the intro, we have a new experience that's coming up at the end of February, Align Your Launch, which is really exciting. It's a free event that I'm doing, and I would love to have you join us. So let me tell you a little bit more about the positive intelligence framework that helps you to develop mental fitness. So mental fitness is just like it sounds, but it's learning to be able to make your mind a powerful tool to learn how to help it to become one of your assets versus something that runs you ragged and causes you stress and causes you anxiety and causes you to get tripped up in these patterns of self-sabotage. So I learned this framework about 4 years ago. And it came to me at a time where I was really frustrated with my business. I had had some launches that I would have at the time said flopped. They were flopped launches. And I've come to change my perspective on that because I realized after working with this tool set that everything is a gift or an opportunity. And although I didn't get the result I was looking for, I got the opportunity, the lessons, the growth that allow me to get to where I am now. And having not gone through that, I wouldn't have learned that. I wouldn't have evolved into the person that I am now. And so at the time, I was experiencing a lot of frustration around delivering these workshops and then having it be really limited signups or no signups at all. And I really would get into this exhausted spiral after a launch and would get into that feeling of being bummed out, worn out, exhausted, defeated, and depleted because I had been running on the anxiety overdrive. If you've listened to other episodes where, I was just in that push, 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 go, go, go energy, and I would get to the other side of the launch. And if I didn't achieve my goals or I fell short, then my mind would just have a heyday and I'd be so just like flat out and spiraling in self-criticalness and doubt, and it would cause me to feel really sad. And I'll back up a little bit and say that as someone who over the course of my lifespan have had seasons of sadness and really felt like that ache of sadness was my companion for a long time, I knew that feeling. And so for me, it was in a sense triggering because having gone through periods of depression in the past, I was scared that that was going to happen again and I would resist it, and that would cause a lot of internal battle of like, why am I feeling like this? I shouldn't feel like this. But what happened around that time was I was introduced to this framework. And I began to learn more about the ways that we respond to stressful situations and more about the brain and how it's wired. And so, what happens when we are under a stressful situation and we may be experiencing some of that anxiety and the overwhelm and the confusion and the self-doubt that can come in the launch situation, right? And it's hard to keep our energy up because it's a long duration of like promo and this and that. And so we tend to, if we're not mindful of these patterns and these ways that we self-sabotage, it can be really easy for us to get in that spiral and that push energy of stress. So when we're under stress, a different part of our brain is activated called the amygdala, and it goes into a survival response because that's how we're wired, right? Thank you, thousands of years of evolution, but that's how we're wired. So in that part of our brain are these patterns and programs that we were modeled as children, that began to be implanted into our subconscious mind because we practice them so much that your brain was like, okay, we're doing this. This is how we handle things. This is what we do. This is how we stay in our family or tribe of origin, right? Because this is all about survival from the brain's perspective. And so what would happen is that if we are experiencing that stress of a launch or a promo or whatever it is you're doing in your business or life, then these patterns get triggered. So as I go through these 10 different ways that we may self-sabotage, you may witness yourself in quite a few of them, or you may recognize, oh yeah, my mom's kind of like that, or oh, my dad's kind of like that. But I want you to just be curious about it. I want you to just look at it through a lens of learning, because this is the operating system that was installed when you were less than 7 years old, right? And so this is kind of like the training wheels on a bicycle to get you to where you are. And now that you're learning and we are diving deeper into this, then you'll be able to begin to shift that and rewire, because your brain is absolutely incredible and it has a quality to it called neuroplasticity. And this is a relatively new discovery, is that you can begin to rewire your mind. You can begin to create new patterns for yourself when you practice the tools that you're going to learn at the workshop, and we're going to start to explore a little bit more into today. But you can begin to create new responses to stressful situations. And this is what's important, to be able to overcome the anxiety, to be able to learn how to harness the power of your mind so that it's not running the show. You control it rather than it controlling you. So if we are experiencing, oh yeah, so my story. So I was feeling really depleted, really exhausted, was worried that I was going to slide down that slippery slope of sadness again. And I was looking for solutions. And this beautiful woman named Lorraine and I had met at a networking event, and she was telling me about this framework, and she was learning to coach it herself. And so she wanted people to come into her pod and to be able to learn it, and so that they could learn it and they could begin to practice it. And so I said, sign me up. I want to learn more about why I tend to get tripped up, why I tend to be a perfectionist, why I tend to be all these things. And she said, oh, you're going to love this then. And I said, okay. I love learning, and I know many of you do. And if you're a podcast listener, you probably really love to learn. But what this framework does is it really distills it down, because the researcher, Shirzad Shamin, uncovered only 10 patterns of self-sabotage that exist in all humans. And we all have them, some of them in common. We all have one in common. And many of us, especially as entrepreneurs, have a few of them in common. I've come to recognize, sharing this tool set with a lot of my clients in my community. And so I started to practice PQ. So PQ is positive intelligence, the ability to harness the power of your mind. And so I started to practice it, and I started to look through this lens of the saboteurs, of this committee in our head that are like these characters that can cause us to get tripped up and get frustrated and cause us to feel, negative, lower vibration, lower frequency emotions, because they pull us down and they contract us. And so I started to really understand myself a lot more deeply. And I'm hoping this episode will give you that level of insight as well, because this collection of characters, which I have come to call the shitty committee, because they just talk a lot of crap, they make us feel like poop and they don't do anything. So I call them that. But that's in jest. But the truth is that the interesting thing about these characters is that within each of them is a gift. Within each of them is a superpower, because what they're doing is they are taking this interesting little quality and they are hijacking it, and they're overusing it, or they're not letting you use it at all. And so as we go through the 10 different saboteurs, the 10 different ways that we self-sabotage, I want you to just honor that. And we'll talk a little bit about the gift in each one of them. Because when you learn to reclaim that gift, when you learn to use that gift from a wise, higher, intentional, sage self version of you, from a higher perspective, the one that's in line with your vision, then that's where we get to get pulled by the energy of the vision. We get pulled by the energy of the goal, not driven forward by that push, push, go. You're only going to be good enough when you've done all these things and when you have these certifications and when you have a 10K minute and whatever else your brain is telling you, which is not true, because you're worthy and deserving and whole exactly as you are, because your eternal nature is the essence of that beautiful, unchanging, divine potentiality that is your true essence. That's the truth. And that's what that sage knows. That's what your heart knows. That's what the wise warrior within knows. But our mind wants to tell us everything different. The ego mind, the saboteurs, want us to believe that we must do or be or have something more to be enough, to be worthy, to be deserving. And that's simply not true. It's not true, right? And so whatever lens you look at this through, of spirituality or science, or, if you are practicing certain religions, you can see that, right? You can see that, people in Christianity say that God gives you the gifts, God gives you the vision. And so maybe the universe is benevolent and loving and the universe has your back, however you want to look at this, right? So that's the beautiful overlap of the yogic philosophy and the mental fitness framework, is that when you come back to the present moment, when you come back to your senses, when you come back into that alignment, however you want to say it, you have access to this higher wisdom. Because what you've done effectively is quiet the amygdala and activate the prefrontal cortex, which is your higher mind, the creative, interesting, engaging, patient, loving, aligned part of your mind that is the masterpiece creation. So we go from being in survival to creation. So again, from the neuroscience perspective, what we're doing there is we are creating a new pathway in the brain when we take this different approach, when we become more responsive than reactive. So let's talk about launching. I hope I have intrigued you on the framework, because not only is it effective for when we get spiraled into self-doubt and those difficulties that can be associated with sadness or depression, or into the overwhelm and the restlessness of the brain that can be associated with ADD or ADHD, and so, or anxiety of the worrying and the contemplating every possible scenario and getting spiraled into either the past or the future. What we're doing is we're learning to come back to the present moment. And I was going to say it's easier said than done, but it's actually pretty easy. What's easier said than done is returning and remembering to do it, right? Because once you have been hijacked by the judge, by the characters, that's where we kind of get spiraled out into anxiety and we get all in our head. So let's talk about the 10 different ways we self-sabotage, which tend to show up for a lot of people, right? And so they're associated with things that maybe feeling like you're questioning yourself, doubting yourself, comparisonitis, or feeling like, what am I even doing here? Or is anybody going to sign up? Is my offer any good? Like, I don't even know what I'm talking about. Do I know? I need a new certification, and like all of that stuff. That let's just take a breath and put a hand on the heart and acknowledge the fact that we all experience this in some way, shape, or form, because that's how we're wired. Okay. And so just give yourself some compassion, give yourself some love. And that's one of the tools and the powers of the sage, is cultivating that self-compassion and self-empathy. So that's almost an antidote to self-sabotage, if you will. So first on the scene, whenever something is, a lot, whether it's in a launch or you're doing an invitation or offer, you're doing a sales call, the first on the scene in a stressful situation is your judge. So a lot of people, talk about the inner critic, but the inner critic is partway there. The judge is happy to be an inner critic, but it's also happy to judge the situation and other people. So that's the first one on the scene. And then it begins to recruit the ones that you were modeled as a child, that you were shown by your caregivers, your parents, that this is how we do things. This is how we handle things. This is, what our family does, that sort of thing. So think about this through a lens of curiosity from your childhood. So where we are critiquing everything, we're worried about it, we're not sure if it's going to work out, this, that, and the other thing. So the second one, and they're not in any sort of sequential order, I'm just the list that I made. The second one is the stickler. So the stickler is a perfectionist. So this is where we spend a lot of time on the sales page, for example, a lot of time on the sales page, rearranging the sections or changing the font or changing the tone or changing the color and making sure it's just so. Because if it's not just so, quote unquote, we're not sending it out. No one can see this. What is the point? And that sort of level of attention to detail. And so that's the superpower in there, because the stickler has a very high attention to detail, which is, of course, that's important. I mean, we don't want to send out emails with broken links or like all sorts of typos. I mean, typos are okay, but we want to have a standard for what we're doing, but the stickler has an extremely high standard. So that attention to detail, if it's used with that intentionality and that focus, that's an incredible gift, right? Not everybody has that. So if you find yourself to be a perfectionist, look at it from the flip side. Okay. So another common one that happens is the avoider. Procrastination. I don't know. My launch didn't go so well last time. I don't know if I'm going to do it again, or I've never launched before. I don't know if I should do this. Does anybody care? I'm just going to not do it. Or around an awkward situation. I don't know if I want to do a sales call. They're kind of hard. That sort of avoidance energy. So the avoider, the gift is patience, taking their time, waiting for the right time. Okay, so think about it that way. I want you to think about it, because it can be really easy when we learn these frameworks for our judge to come in and be like, oh, you do that. Oh, you do that all the time. And that very critical voice. So the voice of the judge and the voice of the saboteurs will always have that condescending tone, and aware that there will be subtleties and it will change once you start to tune into them. But there's a tone to it that is very negative in a sense, and very self-depreciating, if you will. And that oh, come on, go fix it. Oh, come on, it's not enough. That sort of push to it. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Whereas the wisdom of the sage has a non-judgmental self-awareness. So we want to take a look at the gift inside each of the saboteurs and look at it through the lens of the sage of oh, that maybe I am like that. Okay, well, how can I use it in a more intentional way? Okay, so that was the procrastinator or the avoider. Next up, which is extremely common in entrepreneurs, which is interesting because this quality is very highly valued in entrepreneurs, is the hyperachiever. I know a lot of people that identify as a high performer, a high achiever, one who just goes after it, very driven. And so we want to make sure that that quality is used from a very intentional place for the gifts and the benefit of all. And for yourself, you're included in the all, right? Because otherwise the hyperachiever has that sort of not good enough yet, not ready yet, or that once we get another certification, or once we have a 6-figure launch, or once we have a 6-figure email list, then and only then will we be worthy of the love and the compassion and the joy and this feeling successful. And the interesting thing about the hyperachiever is that, and if this is you, you'll probably recognize it, is that we tend to, and then this is me, so this is how I know this one very well, which is very highly associated with high functioning anxiety, interestingly enough. So we have this drive and we are going for it. And we set these goals. And if we achieve the goals, then it's okay, good, celebrate. And now what? Because there's that carrot of, oh, well, we did this. Now what's the next thing? But if we don't achieve the goal, you can bet that the judge has a lot to say about it. And it lends to this spiral of inner critique and ruminating on the mistakes and having those self-depreciating thoughts and getting discouraged and going into freeze and shut down. And so it's really, you can see how, that one would very likely recruit the a victim saboteur that's like, oh, well, I don't even know what the point is anymore. And why am I even doing this? And it's never going to work for me. And so what they do is there's what's called a contagion effect. And so when the judge comes on the scene, then recruits the hyperachiever, and then it recruits the secondary ones. And so then it's just like this hodgepodge of these characters that have taken the stage, and it's just like they're running the show. And so this is triggering stress and stress and more stress, which is anxiety, right? For a lot of us, this shows up as the like, whoa, that flipping feeling in our stomach. And so that's the hyperachiever. So of course, it's great to have someone, and if this is you, to have those goals and to push ourselves. But when is enough enough, right? That's the thing to ask ourselves. Okay, so then we have the hypervigilant. So the hypervigilant is kind of, think about that story of the boy who cried wolf, the boy that was given the responsibility to alert the village, and he would just, cry out, wolf, wolf, and then they would get worried, and then there was no wolf, and it happened a lot. And then when the wolf came, he was like, no, really, this time the wolf is here. And everyone's like, yeah, whatever. And then the wolf got into the village. I think that's how it ended, but you probably remember the story. And so the hypervigilant is looking at every scenario from every different angle. Well, what if we do it this way? What if this goes wrong? What if this happens? And so you can see that if we use that from the place of presence and that non-judgmental self-awareness, that's great, because we want to have a plan B. We want to have a plan C. Like, my partner Justin is so good at this. He's like, okay, well, what's your backup plan? And I'm like, I don't know. Oh, okay. Now I create a backup plan thanks to him making that suggestion for me. So we want to be able to have this curiosity and recognizing like, okay, maybe it's not going to go smoothly the first time. So we want to have these other options, right? It's like, what if Zoom decides to upgrade itself in the middle of your webinar and you're like, oh crap, or you get locked out of your own Facebook group, or you can't send DMs because you sent too many. And so we want to make sure that we have backup plans, right? And so again, this is where, as we're growing and learning, when we do this, when we first get started out, this is an opportunity for us to realize, oh, okay, next time, this is how I send out the DMs so I don't get locked out of Messenger. I have my hand up. This has happened a few times. And so we learn, in these smaller launches, these smaller promos, so that we have that information to take with us as we grow and we get bigger, and, we're messaging more and more people. So again, that's where the hypervigilant comes in handy. And then we have the hyperrational. So the hyperrational avoids emotion and is all in the head. And so this is where this is again, sort of cut off and just in the logical mind rather than in the creative, expressive flow energy, right? And so this is, if you look at it from like a masculine versus feminine energy, this is like all focused on the strategy, all focused on the doing and the things and the to-do lists and the tasks, forgetting that you are in fact an emotional being who is the one doing the things. Right. And so this is, again, of course, we want to have that attention to detail and very logical, but this can be a bit cold, because how you connect with your audience and your community is on the emotional level. So we want to be tapped into that. And we also want to be aware of the energy that you're showing up in. Right. And so that's really important as well. So then we have just a few left. So next one, the shiny squirrel. This is called the restless. So that bing bong back and forth. And this is maybe you, if you're like, nah, I don't know, the webinar didn't work. Maybe I'll do a challenge. Maybe I'll do a live launch. Maybe I'll do an email sequence, and just trying all the different things. Or maybe I need a new program. Me, I literally created 7 different programs over the course of the pandemic. I was bored, apparently. But yeah, it's all the different things of, ooh, that one's probably going to be better. Let me just go try that. And that, like, not having the consistency to get momentum. And I'll keep my hand up, because this is me as well, because I would be like, oh, that didn't work. Let's go try something else. And so that's where we want to be open, because the restless is that sense of exploration and curiosity. But the restless, if that this is you very likely have a strong FOMO feeling, right? The fear of missing out, of like, well, what if that's better? What if this party is better than this party? And I should probably try to get to both of them. that sort of, "Ooh, I can't make a decision" sort of energy. Okay. So then we have, this might show up in our business and in our launch as the controller. The next one is a controller. So this is the, I got to do it myself. I don't trust anybody else to do it. Yes, I have a VA, but I'll just do it faster. By the time I, do a video to show her how to do it, I can do it. And so the controller is the, I got to do it myself. And so can you see how that would be, it gives us that quote unquote peace of mind of like, well, I'll get it done. But that, in a sense, puts more on your plate. So lending to more stress, more overwhelm, maybe potentially resentment. And so that's where we, again, want to look at it through this compassionate lens and say, okay, that's good because we need leaders, right? We need leaders. We can't all be the ones that are like, oh, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. You need to be, and you very likely are a leader and an expert and authority. And so taking that charge and moving forward, but from that place of compassion and curiosity and willing to let other people step in and help you out so that you're not draining your energy and you're not stuck in that spiral of stress. Okay, so yeah, two more. Then we have the victim, which is can show up when things don't go our way, or even if they do go our way of, oh, well, that was probably a fluke. I don't think that's ever going to happen again. Or I don't think this is ever going to work out for me. I don't even know why I bother. I'm wasting my time. The algorithm is against me. I'm just not cut out to be an entrepreneur. Does anybody even want my offer? Maybe my offer sucks. That sort of energy, right? And so again, we want to look at this with that loving, compassionate lens. And so what the flip side to that is a deep feeling, right? And this is so important because as entrepreneurs, we tend to be very cerebral, very in our head, and we tend to avoid feeling because that can, take us out of that creative mode. So the beautiful side to the victim is that deep ability to feel. And so that's important, right? We really want to make sure we're processing our emotions and honoring them, but letting go of the story and feeling the feeling so that we can integrate it and we can heal and we can move forward. But what happens if the judge comes on the scene and then, we haven't achieved our goals, and then it takes us into this sort of spiral of sadness or doubt or fear or what have you, is we tend to get stuck there. And I myself have been stuck there many times, right? And if a launch quote unquote flopped and it didn't go as we wanted and we're in that defeated state, it can be that sort of like, I don't ever want to do this again. I can't do this to myself again sort of energy because it's a lot, right? And so again, it's the lens we're looking through. And if we can step back from it and have compassion and recognize the growth and the opportunity here, which is the lens and the perspective of the sage, then it gives us that gentleness. It allows us to forgive. It allows us to be more resilient. It allows us to recognize that success is not a linear path. It's like up, down, all around, backwards, and three ways from Sunday before we, at least in my case. And so just to be really gentle, right? And so the last one is the people pleaser. So people pleasing is saying yes to everything, even when you mean no. It's like when you're just saying yes and inside you're like, oh God, what am I doing? I shouldn't do it, that sort of energy. And so not having boundaries. And so that in and of itself is very much a stress response. It's fun. It's the yes, okay, no problem. I can totally do that. Yeah, no worries. And so that's important for us to remember. And so the beautiful side to that is the willingness to be of service, the willingness to give. Like you're going out there and you're giving value driven events and you're showing up and you're serving the heck out of it and you're making connections and you're being your shiny, radiant self, And so it's so important to have boundaries around that so that you're not overgiving, overdoing, overworking, overthinking. So that's really, those are the 10 different ways that we tend to self-sabotage. So the judge, the stickler, the avoider, the hyperachiever, the hypervigilant, the hyper-rational, the restless, the victim, the controller, the pleaser. And they are all different ways that we handle stress that can cause us to get into that push energy of getting pushed forward by the struggle and the stress, causing anxiety, causing that imposter syndrome, causing comparisonitis, causing us to feel self-doubt, all of that. And so why I wanted to share that is because, as you know now, there's a flip side to it. So how do we go from being hijacked by the saboteurs and dealing with all of those issues that I just mentioned? Well, when we catch ourselves in those patterns, we get to pause. You get to take a power pause. You get to come out of your head and into your body, come back into the wisdom of your heart, calm yourself down, regulate yourself by way of breathing, movement, dance, whatever, however you like to take a power pause. Because power pauses are the most effective way for you to get into aligned energy and really learn to harness the power of your mind by bringing it back, taking command of your mind, and then intentionally from the vision, from your higher self, from the truth of who you are, the wisdom of your sage self, decide how you're going to handle the situation, how you're going to reclaim your superpower from that saboteur and use it to move yourself forward in your launch, move yourself forward in your promo, whatever it is, so that you are truly in control, right? And so that's really what this is cultivating self-command. And self-command is learning to use your mind and harness the power of your mind. So that's what I wanted to share with you today, and how to take a power pause. You can do that however you'd like. You can do breathing, you can ground yourself, you can shake your body, whatever, just coming out of the head into your body, coming out of that survival center in the brain to the state of presence and purpose and true power, really. This is, from a scientific perspective, is learning to cultivate that inner power. And so I hope this was insightful to you. I hope this was helpful. And we're going to be diving more into the mental fitness framework inside the Align Your Launch workshop that is coming up. And so, yes, I'm really excited for that. So that's happening on February 22nd. Would love to have you join us for it. And it is my gift to you, totally free. Come and join us. You're going to learn one of the most powerful tools that CEOs use, as well as a incredible way to boost your productivity, your joy, your creativity by 72%, and learn how you can use the tools we were just talking about to truly overcome launch anxiety, as well as sell out your programs with more ease and more flow in just 15 minutes a day, because that's really how this tool set works. It's that powerful. It only takes 15 minutes a day. So yeah, that's happening at the end of the month. So come and join us. The link to grab your free spot is in the show notes. So please grab your spot, come join us. Feel free to share it with your friends. If you have entrepreneur friends that would really find this useful, that are launching, doing promos, please share that with them, because we would love to have them join us. And I would love to have you there with us too. So have a beautiful rest of your day. Thank you so much for taking the time to learn how to think on purpose, to move your body on purpose, to keep it strong and healthy, to breathe on purpose, to stay regulated, to stay expansive, to stay open, so that you can show up in alignment with your vision, so that you can show up as the purposeful powerhouse CEO that you truly are. So until next time, take good care. Thank you for sharing your takeaways on social, and thank you for being here, and thank you for being so amazing. You're awesome. In case anybody hasn't told you that today, you're freaking amazing, and I'm proud of you.